Good afternoon to all of you entering. We'll give everybody just a moment to settle in and get connected with our webinar this afternoon. If you are coming for the extra costs of living with a disability, you are in the right place. And we'll get started in just another 30 seconds or so. All right, let's get started. So good afternoon. My name is Becky McDicken, and I'm with National Disability Institute. You are here. This is part 4 of our webinar series that is a part of financial wellness for people with disabilities. And as I said just a second ago, today is the extra costs of living with a disability. Next slide. We do have to give you our disclaimer today, which is that NDI is the author and copyright holder of this content, which is provided solely for educational purposes. This material is not intended to replace or supersede local, state, or federal agencies, including applicable laws or regulations. NDI assumes no responsibility for learner interpretations of the content or for any alterations made by third parties. As of today, NDI ensured the accuracy of the data and the links provided. However, external links and benefit information are subject to change. Users are advised to verify numbers before providing services. NDI does not offer direct services or benefits counseling, and this content is not intended as such. Next. As I already said, I am Becky McDicken. We could move to the next slide for some housekeeping. So as you can see, we have ASL interpretation for this webinar. We have two interpreters who will be switching off approximately every 15 minutes. If you are having any trouble viewing the ASL interpreters, please use the Q&A box to let us know. Next. We also have audio and captioning options. So the audio for today's meeting can be accessed by using your computer audio or by calling in on the phone. If you select computer, please make sure your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. To call in for audio, please dial 877-853-5257, and our meeting code is 894-4562-4074. Real-time captioning is being provided, and the captions can be found by clicking the CC button at the bottom of the screen in the Zoom controls. If for some reason you don't see that, please alert us in the Q&A box. Next. If you need have any other questions or need technical assistance, again, please use the Q&A box, not the chat, and the NDI host will answer your questions as we get them. If you do not get your question answered and would like to receive some information or an answer, please email Kish Pisani, which is KPISANI at ndi-inc.org. This webinar is being recorded, and for your convenience, you can see the recordings later or share them later on. We will send out a notification of where those are posted. They are usually posted within 1 to 2 weeks. Thank you. Next. So NDI, just a quick refresher, if you're not familiar with us, we are a national nonprofit organization dedicated to building the better financial future for people with disabilities and their families. We are the first organization that was committed exclusively to championing economic empowerment, financial education, asset development, and financial stability for all persons with disabilities, and we're celebrating our 20th anniversary right now. Next. Just a couple of other things about what we do. We work to build the capacity of the field through training and technical assistance, meaning we spread the good news of financial empowerment. We drive systems change by implementing models that can be replicated in many of our projects. We test innovative approaches to financial empowerment, counseling, things of that nature. We lead research to uncover barriers and opportunities, and we advance change through our public education and policy development. Next, we do have one quick poll for you. We're going to start off on a scale of 1 to 4, 1 being not familiar at all and 4 being very familiar. How familiar are you with the extra cost of living with disability? Are you not familiar, slightly familiar, somewhat familiar, or very familiar? Give you all a few seconds to answer. Got a good blend of slightly familiar, somewhat, and very. So I'll give you a few more seconds. All right. Looks like I say, we have a good mix. We've got some great information coming up for you. So thank you for taking part in the poll. And with that, next slide, I am going to turn things over to NDI's research director, Ramonia Rochester. Ramonia has been just a wonderful asset with our organization, and she agreed to be here today. Ramonia, we thank you so much for your time, and I will turn things over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Becky. Welcome, everyone. I hope we are here and rearing to learn today. I want to start, if you go to the next slide, please, with a few myths and facts about the extra cost of living with disability. I'm not seeing the myths and facts slide on my screen. I hope you are, but one myth is that people with disabilities have many types of financial assistance that takes care of the extra costs of living with disability. How many of you believe that this is a myth? Well, I'd like to share the facts with you, which is that financial assistance to cover the extra cost of disability is often quite limited. I know we have some experts among us today on the extra cost of living with disabilities, so I know you know that well. And for our second myth, many people seem to think that people with disabilities can do little to reduce their cost of living. But the facts say that people with disabilities can increase earnings through employment and the use of work supports to cover impaired related work expenses and more. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the presentation. If you go to the next slide, please. Our next myth, or widely held myth, is that people with disabilities can do little to qualify for funding to cover the extra cost of living with disabilities. That is indeed a myth because the facts say that there are several options, including calling 211 for financial counseling and resources. And our final myth today, people with disabilities cannot save for extra expenses due to resource limits. And we know those resource and asset limits are quite a barrier to saving. However, the facts say that people with disabilities can save through tax-advantaged savings vehicles that do not impact public benefits. And some of these vehicles are child savings accounts, Trump accounts, and ABLE accounts. I hope that has been informative for you. And if we'll move to the next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of background on this body of work, NDI began researching the extra cost of living with disabilities in 2020 and published its first working paper along with infographics and briefs on this phenomenon. And the goal of this research was to move the policy needle. And the study has come a long way since. In 2021, the actual study was published from that working paper. And in more recent times, in 2026 of this year, or in January of this year, the disability squeeze, or out-of-pocket expenses and unmet needs related to disabilities, have been further explored. And if you'll go to the next slide. But why does this matter? Why does this all matter? It matters because disability changes the relationship between income and expenses, not just earnings. And as you can see from the visual, with the extra cost of disabilities, despite reasonable income, basic expenses often win out. And that's what the latest body of work is calling the disability squeeze. Regardless of income, disability-related expenses often override income, often override individuals' abilities to pay for their basic needs. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. So just to put this in further context, the standard poverty measures and benefits rules often exclude disability-related costs. They are not factored in these calculations. So if you look at the graph, you'll notice that in 2026, the poverty level or the federal poverty level is actually $33,000 for a family of 4. However, when you factor the extra cost of living with disabilities, the average household would require about $34,114 in order to be at the poverty level. And of course, to be above poverty would mean much more money in excess of that. And as you can tell from the graph also, even individuals that are able to meet that extra cost in some ways do not rise to the median earnings of most households. If you go to the next slide, please. So this work began, or this research began, with looking at several national surveys. And there were 4 specific surveys that the researchers looked at to estimate this extra cost of living with disabilities. They were the National Financial Capability Study, which determined that 32% of households were burdened with the extra cost of living with disabilities. The Survey of Household Economics and Decision Making by the Federal Reserve Board, which determined that 24% were grappling with the extra cost, or that extra cost was 24%, I beg your pardon. And the National Financial Wellbeing Survey determined that extra cost was 29%. Data from the 4th survey, which is the U.S. Financial Health Pulse Survey, determined that extra cost amounted to about 26% more income that households with disabilities needed in order to be able to meet their basic needs. An average of that amounted to about 28%, or an average of $17,960 per year at median income. And that's $17,960 more than average that would be needed to meet those extra costs. If you go to the next slide, that data has since been updated. And according to statistics from 2026 or more recent data, the average cost or average extra cost of living with disabilities is 29%, or an average of $18,322 more. So households with disability need at least $18,322 more per year in order to maintain their standard of living. And these estimates, of course, vary based on whether people are married or if they have lower estimated out-of-pocket costs. For example, married individuals do have lower costs than single people. And if you'll go to the next slide, research shows that if we were to adjust the federal poverty level to account for the extra cost of living with disabilities, about 2.2 million more people with disabilities would be counted as poor. Now that's whopping, because on average, about 40 million people in 2026 are counted as having a disability. 2.2 million more of people within that group would be counted as poor, which means that there would also be a greater number of people eligible for health and public benefits. If you go to the next slide, please. So adjusting the federal poverty level for the extra cost of living with disability causes the rate of poverty among adults with disabilities to increase substantially. As I said before, about 2.2 million more people with disabilities would be counted as poor. But if you look at the graph, you also see that more people would qualify for Medicaid. More people would also qualify for SNAP in expansion states. And more people, or significantly more people, would qualify to receive health insurance subsidy. Next slide, please. Now, it's important to note that there are direct and indirect costs associated with the extra cost of living with disabilities. Those direct costs, the researchers have said, include medical care and prescriptions, assistive technology and mobility equipment, personal assistance and caregiving, accessible transportation and housing, and the extra cost of food for specialized diets. However, what research has not been able to uncover very well just yet is those indirect costs. For example, reduce unpaid household labor due to having to caregive, for example, for someone with a disability, and how caregiving translates into reduced earnings for that household. So someone having to stay home to take care of someone with disabilities is often unable to earn or not able to earn at the level they typically would, which results in reduced earnings for that household. And then, of course, there is the ultimate foregoing of earnings altogether, or work, due to either having that extra cost of disability or having to caregive for someone with a disability. And if you'll go to the next slide, this plays significantly into the out-of-pocket burden. Adults with disabilities with incomes below the federal poverty limit have lower expenditures, but greater financial burden from their out-of-pocket expenses. On average, these expenses amount to about $5,341 per year. And just to put that in context, that's often less than 50% of what the average person below FPL earns in a year. And this is also equivalent to about 20% of household income on average. So just think about it. You are having to expend resources for those extra costs, and this is amounting to 1/5 of your household income, which is already very low. So this creates invariably undue financial pressure. And so 67% rather, of individuals with disabilities report at least one unmet disability-related need. This means that 67% of individuals are unable to meet at least one of their needs related to their disability. And if you go to the next slide, as we said earlier, disability expenses are rarely considered rather in developing public policy. For example, there is little consideration of the fact that people with disabilities tend to be employed for less income and wages, They on average have lower wages than people without disabilities and are also more likely to be low or moderate income or live in poverty. And if you go to the next slide, in current policy, poverty is measured based on income, which means that eligibility for means-tested public benefits programs is predominantly based on income as well. These income measures do not consider expenses or the additional out-of-pocket costs associated with living with a disability. As a result, they understate the true level of economic hardship for households that include a person with disabilities. As we said earlier, about 2.2 million more people would be counted as poor if we were to count these extra out-of-pocket costs. And if you'll go to the next slide. Now, there are some spaces in policy where the extra cost is in fact recognized. Now, there is a larger standard deduction for people who are blind. There's a deduction for impairment-related work expenses for workers with disabilities. There is a deduction for medical care expenses that exceed 10% of an individual's adjusted gross income. There's also self-directed allotments and customized budgets developed through person-centered planning for Medicaid. And there is Medicaid long-term care and home and community-based services, which provide personal assistance services. There is housing assistance. There is also energy assistance. Of course, we continue to give credit where credit is due, because when passing the legislation for SSI for children in 1972, Congress determined that poor children with disabilities should be eligible for SSI benefits because their needs are often greater than non-disabled children. There is also ABLE. The Achieving a Better Life Experience Act recognizes these extra costs by allowing individuals to save for disability-related expenses in a tax-advantaged account that is not considered an asset when determining eligibility for means-tested public benefits. And of course, SNAP exempts people with disabilities who are receiving benefits from the gross income threshold and allows certain deductions from net income. In addition, they have a higher asset threshold. However, if you go to the next slide, there are policy considerations that would make the extra cost of living with disabilities more tenable for more individuals. These include changes to the social safety net. There needs to be different eligibility standards for food and housing assistance, and a change in eligibility for Medicaid. Changes to the tax code. Changes to who is eligible to open an ABLE account. And we know that in January of this year, the ABLE Adjustment Act took effect, which means where previously you had to incur a disability before age 26 in order to qualify for ABLE accounts, individuals can now qualify for ABLE if they incurred their disability before age 46, which is a significant change. There also needs to be changes to how much funding annually can be contributed to an ABLE account. Currently, the threshold for contributions is about $102,000 per year. And we know $102,000 might not do for retirement and for some other major life expenses. Policy considerations should also include changes to financial planning. So recalculation of financial needs, whether short or long-term, and examining financial savings and investment choices for people with disabilities would make the extra costs of living with disabilities more achievable. And if you go to the next slide, where does that leave us in the scheme of things, in the grand scheme of things? Well, more research is needed. We need more information on the types of expenses that are driving these costs. We mentioned some that are currently under researched. For example, those extemporaneous costs. We need to examine or look at or do more research on the extra costs of disability for each individual. Currently, research looks at the household for the most part. We also need to look at how living with a disability affects the income of the individual or the family member, such as the cost of caregiving, as mentioned previously. We also need to look at the differences between people living with long-term versus short-term disabilities. And importantly, what people need to spend in order to participate fully in society needs to be a consideration for as we develop policy, as we conduct further research, and as we attempt to mitigate these extra costs of living with disabilities.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Becky. I was just about to say, I believe Becky now has a poll question for us.
I do. So thank you so much, Ramonia, for your time. Excellent information. We're going to have another pop-up poll before we get to some of the tips about finances. But poll questions 2 and 3 are, what are some of the extra costs people with disabilities face? And then the second question is, which savings options allow people with disabilities to save without impacting their public benefits? So I'll give you a few minutes or seconds here to answer our poll. All righty. Going to give you just another moment or two. All right. Well, thank you. We're going to make sure we get those answers out to you, but thank you for participating. Obviously, the second question is actually, ABLE accounts allow you to do that. We have, I believe, do we have the ABLE NRC website? We have a component of NDI where you can explore ABLE accounts for you and your family if you are interested in learning more about them. On our website, we also have a couple of pre-recorded sessions about ABLE accounts. So they are a fantastic tool. And of course, the answer to question 2 was, which extra costs do people with disabilities face? What's the answer? It can be so many things, but lost wages due to barriers to employment and things of that nature. So they can all apply in certain situations. Next slide. So if you're dealing with these extra costs, here are some tips. And obviously, this is what NDI works on, is that financial empowerment piece. So I hate using the budget word, but the slide is budgeting for the extra costs. We prefer to actually call it a spending plan because that sounds much more friendly. You can allocate your funds and still spend it. So how do you go about doing that? This is a very basic overview, and we're not going to get into a lot of depth today, but this is also a teaser for an upcoming training I'll tell you about at the end. But if you need to create a budget for your household or that spending plan, the first thing you have to do is write down all of the income that is coming in. That could be from a job or multiple jobs. That could be from your benefits. But you need to write everything down so you know where you're starting from. The next step would be listing all of your fixed expenses. That would be, the things that don't change, which are, maybe your mortgage or rent, a car payment, sometimes your utilities, if you're on a budget plan where you pay the same every month. Write down all of those expenses and then write down your variable expenses. A variable expense is something that changes on a month-to-month basis, or even week-to-week. That would be things like groceries or, your fun money. Do you go to the movies occasionally? That would not be the same every single week. You want to write all of those down. We have a couple of great worksheets. We'll give you the links for those in a moment, where you can track your expenses. You can figure out what your spending plan is going to look like. Now, the next one, it says cut back expenses. So actually, let me take one step back. When you're creating that spending plan, it's an equation. So we've got what is the income minus what are the expenses. In that situation, if the number's positive, you've got money left over. Maybe you can pay down debt. Maybe you can put it in an ABLE account. But the fourth thing says there, cut back expenses. That's when your money's coming a little bit even, or you're in the negative. Now, you can cut back expenses, but again, it's also a that two-piece equation. You can also look for ways to increase your income. Obviously, if you have any debts, to try to work on paying those down, negotiate that level down. That is going to help you pay that off more quickly. And then you can turn that money maybe into a savings account, that ABLE account, or things of that nature. The link will be in the slides if you ask for them, but the financial wellness tools on our website are fantastic. So I encourage you to check that link out that's in the bottom right. And yes, we will be sending out the slides. Next slide, please. So some thoughts about saving. So creating that savings plan can help you be ready for those unexpected emergencies and expenses, for missing time off work that you weren't expecting to. So it's a good thing to brainstorm ways to increase your income. Again, that first part of the equation. Maybe you can look for, better employment, ask for a raise. Maybe you can look for supplemental employment. Maybe you can get that side hustle going, that cake decorating business you want to run out of your own kitchen, whatever it might be, ways to increase that income. You can also have a yard sale, sell some things that you don't need, or do it on eBay, whichever way you prefer. Obviously, we've all heard ways to brainstorm to decrease your spending, tighten that belt. We can look at meal planning, learning how to cook if you eat out a lot. Taking a cooking class in the long run might behoove you into saving some money. Clipping coupons. There are people who make their livelihoods from that. Shopping at thrift stores has become really cool with all the kids today. The youth that's a big thing with them. Look for ways to lower your bills. So like utilities, usually there are savings plans that they are initiatives they can show you, like how do you weatherproof your windows? How can you reduce your electric bills, your gas bills? We want to look for ways to do that. And most utility companies have helpful handouts that can help you look to cut those expenses. If you're really in need, you can ask about special programming. There are subsidized programs where you can get some extra money towards your heating bill in the winter, for example, things of that nature. So just contact your utility companies. And I think we've already mentioned it, but we have our Financial Resilience Center, but call 211. If you have an immediate need, they have the local resources and may be able to help you get that, electricity bill paid with various resources, or point you in the right direction. 211 may also have interest in grants, or they may be able to notify you of grants that they have towards assistive technology. So if you need to build a wheelchair ramp or make a vehicle more accessible, those grants may be able to help you. But contact 211 for some of those resources. I glossed over the Financial Resilience Center, so I'll go back there. NDI's Financial Resilience Center was created during COVID, and it is a website that is meant for consumers with tons of resources and tools about a lot of questions that come up within the disability community. I encourage you to go there, look at our resources. We have a way that you can ask questions. So if there's something you need an answer to, please submit it through our FRC at that time. Obviously, right now, you can do it with us live. But also sign up for our mailing list, because then we can get you the latest information as we send out newsletters or blogs, or tell you about other upcoming events that we have. Let's move to the next slide. So some options for saving money. If you actually get your budget or your spending plan under control, we highly encourage everyone to get banked. We have actually seen with the research that many people with disabilities are underbanked and underrepresented due to different obstacles they may face. But with the advent of online banking, automatic bill pay, getting banked has never been easier. So we highly encourage everyone to check out their local bank or credit union. Now, the one thing to recognize is that money in a bank account is a countable resource. Again, that's where that ABLE account might come in handy to put some money aside that wouldn't be counted. But one good thing about being banked, your money is safe and secure. It is protected by the federal government, up to $250,000 per person per account by either the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or the National Credit Union Administration. Same thing for credit unions. With bank accounts or credit union accounts, you may be charged various fees based on the account you have. And coming up, we have a sheet that can help you sort of compare and look for what the best things are when it comes to looking for an account that will serve your needs. There are some guidelines on offering cost-effective accounts at joinbankon.org. If you go to that link, they actually have banks in our communities that are offering accounts that have better access. If you've had problems in the past with a bank account, they will tell you which banks will give you second chance accounts or things of that nature. But they have a standardized list of criteria that you must have with an account at that financial institution in order to even join the coalition. So if they are listed at bankon.org, they have some of these accounts that are more cost friendly. Now, we've mentioned ABLE accounts a couple of times. Again, we have a lot of resources on our website, but ABLE accounts are not a countable resource. They do not affect your eligibility for FAFSA or HUD help, SNAP, SSI, Medicaid, Medicare, and other means-tested benefits. They can be spent when you put money into an ABLE account. It can be spent on qualified disability expenses. The IRS defines that pretty broadly. So if it's related to a disability, most of the time you can use your ABLE money for that. You must qualify. I think Ramonia covered some of that. The age of onset for your disability must be now before age 46, but that doesn't mean, you have to be under 46. If you're older than that, but your disability occurred by age 46, you are eligible to open an ABLE account. Definitely check into that. Next slide, please. So here's a couple of other tools that could be helpful. We have here the FDIC's Model Safe Accounts template. If you click on that, you can get the guidelines for offering cost-effective transactional and savings accounts within New Jersey even. You can delve down into the states. We have New Jersey ABLE listed, so that's specific to your state and what happens in New Jersey. And lastly, our ABLE NRC. The reason I would encourage you to check out ABLE NRC is because we actually compare and contrast all the ABLE accounts throughout the country. So you can see, even if New Jersey's is fantastic, you may see if there's another one that suits your needs better, but it'll give you an idea of what you are looking for in an ABLE account. And of course, there's a lot more information and previously recorded webinars there too. Next slide. We always encourage people, if you can, work, because employment is going to help with your income and help afford all those extra costs. I know a lot of people get very nervous about, I'm going to lose my benefits if I start to work. There are so many work supports that can help you go back to work that can then help you increase your income. We've got a couple links here, but the big one, work supports make it easier for people with disabilities to go to work. There are safety nets for if something doesn't work out and things of that nature. So definitely check out the website there and look into a Ticket to Work program. These promote self-sufficiency through employment, and they help with benefits counseling and work incentives. So you can see all the different options you have that can help you safely return to work and increase that income. With combining that with ABLE accounts, You can have an employer contribute to an ABLE account even, but between ABLE and work supports, you can lead to financial empowerment for people with disabilities. So it's the best thing. The best thing for you, if you can, is to go back to work and increase that income. Again, lots of supports on our website, so feel free to check that out. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. And I know Lori's been busy putting a lot of links in our chat as well. And next slide. So we have some extra financial education tools if you are interested in learning more about financial education. We have our resilience, NDI's Financial Resilience Center, a load of resources and tools. We have those financial wellness tools that are on our website. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a curriculum called Your Money, Your Goals that is fantastic. It is free. It is a very trusted resource, and NDI actually assisted in the writing of a companion guide for people with disabilities. So I would definitely encourage you to look at that one if you're looking for more. And then lastly, FDIC Money Smart program, they have one for people with disabilities as well, a great standard curriculum for all things about financial empowerment topics. Next slide. Some other resources that we haven't mentioned yet, we've got our NDI report, the extra costs of living with a disability in the US. I think Ramonia talked about that. Some of our pre-recorded webinars, the link is here. We have a report on the extra disability expenses for people who are blind. And lastly, a favorite podcast among NDI staff, the Disability Squeeze podcast. We have a link to that as well. Next slide. Now, don't go anywhere. I know it sounds like I'm wrapping up, but we got a couple more things to tell you about. So first off, though, another poll question, please. So now, after sitting with us for the last 45 minutes, are you feeling better about, being familiar with the extra costs of living with a disability? We're looking to see for, that knowledge gain. We hope you're feeling better about the topic. I'll give you just a second to collect our answers. And that's great. It looks like a lot of you feel much better about the topic and have learned a lot. It's a lot to digest as well. So we will, again, send out the slides or be putting them on our website so you can go back and look at the citations and things like that. Next slide. After today's webinar, how would you rate your understanding of the extra cost of living? Didn't we just do this? Now I'm confused. Nope, they're just similar questions. So you're feeling stronger. Excellent. Thank you so much for answering. We appreciate you being here. Now we get to the good stuff. Not that that wasn't good stuff. Sorry, the exciting stuff that we're all excited about. Next slide, please. We'll get to comments or questions. Actually, next slide. I want to get to this next piece. Part of our project here has been this webinar series with our project in New Jersey. The previous webinars are on our website, the 3 previous ones, and the link will be in the slides, as you can see. But if you missed it, we had Financial Inclusion 101, the 5 key strategies for people with disabilities, and navigating Social Security disability benefits while working. All of them were fantastic, so we hope you will check those out. But all of this has been teeing you up for something even more exciting. Next slide. We are going to be having some training sessions this September. NDI will be coming to New Jersey and doing a 3-day training at the College of New Jersey. The dates have been set for September 15th through 17th. It is a free training other than your, travel costs, things of that like that. The training itself is free. You get to spend time with myself, my colleagues. A couple of us will be there, and we will go through a lot of the financial empowerment material in a lot more depth, including ABLE accounts, including spending plans, including credit. If you are interested in joining us this September, we do have a cap on the number of participants. Make sure you get your interest form in so that we can get your registration to you and get you signed up for this training. We are so excited to be coming to New Jersey to do this. We are trying to equip everybody who is interested with the knowledge to turn around and teach colleagues or have one-on-one conversations with your children, with a classroom, with your clients, depending on who you are and who you're serving. So we're very excited to be able to announce those dates today. With that, next slide. If you have questions, this is where we can now take other questions if you have them or other comments. Obviously, that's my email address if you have anything you want to follow up with us on after the fact. But I will wait to see if there's any other questions. I think there's been a few answered over in the box. Anything else? And if not, I can let you go. I can say have a great rest of your day. We look forward to seeing you in New Jersey this fall. And with that, I will just say have a great afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us.